This is Abhi Bharti and we are here in Den Haag, in Netherlands for the Cloud Foundry Summit. And today we have with us once again Chip Childers. You are CTO of Cloud Foundry Foundation.
Yep.
We just talked, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Swap, we just need to stop meeting in these far-flung places.
Yes, but a lot has changed in these 2 weeks. If you look at just from the Cloud Foundry's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think quite a few things have changed in our ecosystem. Not for the foundation, but certainly
In the
for
ecosystem,
our ecosystem. In fact, I'd even step back. I'd say across the last 6 months or so, it's been pretty interesting.
Right.
All the M&A activity, all the new projects, all of our community's focus on reiterating our North Star, which is the developer experience, and embracing other projects.
And since before we started the interview, you said, ask me tough questions,
Absolutely.
Question that makes you uncomfortable.
Ask away. Well, nothing makes me uncomfortable, so I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if you think it would make you uncomfortable, you can ask.
In asking the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, but before we go there, let's talk about your keynote today, if you still remember what you said.
Yeah, sure.
It was about building the bridges. And that's what, you touched upon it last time also when we talked a bit about it.
Yeah.
So tell us, what was the core of your keynote today?
Yeah, so the core of the keynote was actually not about building bridges. That was one of the points. The core of the keynote was to remind our audience that, and our community, that we really do have a North Star, and that North Star is empathy for the user. Actually, a few weeks ago, when we were in San Diego together, I was very focused on just the high-level concept of user empathy in the context of open source communities. But here, I spoke specifically to the Cloud Foundry community to both congratulate them on the consistent empathy for users, but also to point out that we just are going to continue to see more and more technological change, and there are some things that we can do to make sure that our community continues to be productive, continues to be valuable, and continues to evolve just like every community needs to. So there were 3 basic concepts. The first one was to do what I call accept the duality of structure and creative chaos. And the analogy that I used for that was actually should be a familiar one to some of your readers and listeners, which is Cathedral and the Bazaar. But I take a very different angle on that duality. So the original missive was about proprietary software versus open source software. That was kind of the core of it. But I think that in today's world, most software that's used in enterprise technology has open source roots at minimum, right? So we're no longer talking about proprietary versus open source. What we're really talking about is what are the creative processes that are used to produce the software that the enterprise is going to consume. And I think that there's value in using both the creative process of kind of the bazaar, the market, right? Lots of different stalls with different spices and smells. It's very creative, but it's also constantly changing, right? Because individual vendors may choose not to come back the next day. And then at the same time, hold the idea of, you need something that it's consistent, it's there for the long term, and it's going to continue to embrace new ideas as they evolve out of the marketplace. So that was kind of step 1, was the duality there. The second thing was, that we're going to continue to have to navigate change, and we need to bake that into our project's core DNA, right? Some people think of a line of code as an asset, and they're wrong, right? So every line of code represents just potential technical debt. The value in what we create as software developers is the idea, and then it's the fact that the idea is manifested or created, right? But that creation process takes it from an asset, makes it usable, but then burdens you with the liability of the code. And so the same thing applies to any open source project. It has to be ready to shed software code that it doesn't need to maintain anymore, bring new code in, create new code, be constantly evolving, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of the core point there. And so the last point that I had was really was a request to the community to say, many of the people in the audience have experience being an enterprise developer in what I call the old style, right? It's ticketing systems, it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday night change windows, it's all of these things that I personally lived through that I really wouldn't wish on anyone because actually we figured out as an industry that's not the most optimal way to do it, right? When a company says, listen, I upgrade production systems in the middle of the day, a work day, and there was no impact. I think we found the right patterns for how we build software. We found the right patterns for how platforms should be built. And so I want that story to get out there. I want more of the people who get to experience that type of productivity, that type of like clarity of why am I doing things in the middle of the night, and the velocity that you can achieve focusing on just the business problems, right? They need to get out there and go share that with those that don't have that yet. So that was a rough gist of what was happening on stage today.
Right. Go back to the empathy point that you mentioned
Yeah,
earlier.
sure.
And also change. If you look at Cloud Foundry's journey, you have always been changing.
Yes.
This is not a project where you react to something. Something is changing the market and industry, and your projects has evolved with that. So that has been, I think, a strength of Cloud Foundry.
Well, we do react, but we don't react on a trigger.
Yeah, it's not a knee-jerk reaction kind of reaction.
Yeah. So we absolutely react, right? So I mean, one of the things that I showed was a chart of some of our global perception survey data, right? So we track basically what IT decision makers globally, truly globally, not Cloud Foundry users, but global perception, what they care about, what they're using, what they're thinking about. And we've been doing it since February 2016. So what I showed was an interesting chart where we plotted interest in platform as a service. And just think about that, for a second. It kind of went up, then it went back down through a dip, and then went back up, and then went back down through a dip again, over time until today. And so it's back up to where it was when we started in February 16. So it sort of went through these two periods of interest and then dipping interest. I plotted that against the containers, right? And containers kind of steadily went up. It sort of leveled off right about now. I expect it's going to continue to go up, right, as it becomes more pervasive. And one of the things that has been, I guess, a challenge, right? But also our opportunity as a community is that the big open source community has created a new version of the infrastructure abstraction, right? Kubernetes, containers. And if you plotted those two dips, what was interesting is that they line up with the cycle of Docker, right? Docker's going to solve all of our problems. They lined up with Kubernetes is going to solve all of our problems. And what we've seen is that these are really powerful tools, and I'm not dismissing them at all. But what is the problem that the business is actually trying to solve? Infrastructure solutions are great for cost optimization. They can enable agility, right? But if they're just horizontal solutions, they're not solving any sort of competitive advantage question for the companies, right? What solves that is enabling software developers to get on with the job of building the software that's going to differentiate, right? And shedding all of the other work that you can. So as an industry, I think that we're a little bit at fault in some ways because we keep getting distracted, right? We did the IaaS wave, we then did the Docker craze, and then we did Kubernetes. We keep getting distracted from what that actual mission is. It's application development to differentiate, and then it's find the least complicated, simplest way to deal with infrastructure. Now, Kube, incredible software. Its rise, its rapid maturation, that gave us an opportunity as a community to embrace it, right? So we've done that. I think we demonstrated it. IBM did an awesome demo of the Cloud Foundry developer experience right on top of OpenShift on the keynote stage. Now that they've acquired Red Hat, they thought that would be an excellent opportunity to show what they see as a great Kubernetes distribution, and what they have is a great developer experience, working really well together. We're seeing the same thing with with the way Pivotal's moving forward with their platform, especially now through the VMware acquisition. We think that infrastructure story that VMware has and the developer story that Pivotal has is going to be really strong for our ecosystem as well as the Kubernetes ecosystem. There's a lot of really great value that we can get from each other here.
Yeah, that Red Hat announcement was kind of interesting because Red Hat
Super
and Cloud
big
Foundry
price tag, right?
Yeah. What does all of this mean for Cloud Foundry?
I think it's really simple. We have a heritage of focusing on the enterprise developer or just developer productivity more generally. And so what I've asked of the community is to say two things. One, there's going to be a burst of energy around innovation for developer experience on top of this new infrastructure, right? On top of Kubernetes. Not only do we need to be part of the innovation and listen to the ideas of everyone around us, but we need to bring our knowledge, our experience, and our heritage to that conversation. I think that it's not only can people that are well versed in the way CF thinks about it and our evolution, because we've been evolving and refining this experience through hundreds of thousands of developers using it, providing feedback for years now. So we can bring that to the broader conversation and the broader innovation cycle that I think is about to kick off around developer experience, again, on top of Kube as the new infrastructure. I think it's super exciting because there are some also great ideas that have taken, if you look at models like GitOps, or how much of a developer workflow should be fully embedded in pipelines and CI/CD systems versus available in a command line, and what's the IDE experience really need to look like, and then start looking at, function as a service is a kind of a different model. It's not a different programming model necessarily, but really it's more about, it's a different model for distributed system architecture. We learned a lot with microservices, right? Functions are kind of a new thing now. Maybe there's a way that we can marry these two together really well, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so much potential in experimenting.
Right.
There's so much potential in new ideas, new innovations that I want our community to both be sharing, but also be listening. Right. Because I think it's very important.
We are moving at such a fast pace.
Yeah, we are.
It's really hard to. If you look at Kubernetes, it's very hard to use. It's not an easy piece of
Actually,
too many new knobs.
I think that there's a different way to say that. Mm-hmm. It's not that Kubernetes is hard to use. It's that it is designed for a specific consumer.
Right. Yeah.
And that specific consumer is a very generalized actor, right? Mm-hmm. It needs to be very good at solving any number of infrastructure style questions or scenarios. That's different than saying, what's the right, is an enterprise developer the right, do they fit into that actor archetype, right? I don't think they do. I truly don't believe they do. What I believe is that actor archetype that Kubernetes is designed for, what fits into it for an enterprise developer is the system that simplifies it, that gives them the power that they need, but the guardrails that are also going to keep them productive. In creative endeavors, right, there's basically this idea that if you are asked to do something, like let's say design a system and you have zero limitations, zero constraints, right? Dollars, people, budget, even existing technology, like where do you start? Mm-hmm. Your most creative time is when you have maybe a deadline, right?
Right, exactly.
Or maybe you have a constraint that's budget, or maybe you have both. And those are very simple examples of constraints that actually enable a creative process to occur. I think the same thing applies to a developer. You can get too constricted, you can get too limited, in which case then you can't be productive. But there's a lot of value in this idea that if you provide some constraint, around that developer experience, you don't have unlimited options. All of a sudden, you might have clarity, and then you can start solving the business problem or writing the software. Right? That's where you should have full flexibility. You shouldn't have to worry about the plumbing. Right? It's like asking a master chef.
Yeah.
To go solder, the drain for the sink in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Let's let them focus on using their knives and the stovetop and great hots and the food and the spices and create something with what matters to them.
And you also made some announcements today.
Yeah, a little one. It's in line with this idea that we want our community and other communities to start collaborating even more on developer experience, right? Everybody needs to mix together their ideas. Together with the CNCF, we're going to be co-hosting a serverless practitioner summit at Cloud Native Con North America coming up on November 18th. We think that's going to be interesting. You'd say, well, wait a minute, Cloud Foundry is not serverless? We're all kind of solving the exact same problem, right? We're thinking about developer productivity. So two reasons for the CF community to show up. One, maybe those technologies that are being discussed there could represent future architectures for us, right? We don't hold our code tightly. We hold our ideas, and we want to learn from those ideas. We can evolve the architecture just like we have recently around Kubernetes. The second reason, though, is honestly, I think there's a lot of conversation that's going to happen around how do we continue to improve that developer experience, and are there these, are there new models, new thoughts, new ideas, and what can we do with all that?
Awesome. So once again, Chip, thanks for talking with you. And it's actually nice to be here at at the Cloud Founders Summit. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's the energy that you feel is incredible. It's very warm community, very welcoming.
Yeah,
community.
It's a really special community. I've been involved since the founding of the foundation back in early 2015. We've certainly, just like every community, right? People do come, people do go. But the folks that are here continue to impress me with their openness, their warmth, their creativity. And really, as I said, I'm encouraging them. It's time to really get engaged, bring the developer experience ideas to these other groups, and let's move the whole industry forward.
Yes, perfect. Once again, thank you, Chip, for talking to me. And I'm sure that we'll be seeing each other again soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.